Hey, what is going on, guys? Matt Smith here. As always, appreciate you for tuning in. Before we get rolling, do me a favor, hit like, hit subscribe. You know the drill. Helps me out a ton, and I do appreciate it. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope you had a great weekend out there. Week 2 of Colorado training camp underway now, and we hit the ground running. Got the running back coalition today in the press conference to speak to. Before we get going with that, though, if you did not get a chance to recap week 1, had plenty of content out last week, and still plenty of that's going to be evergreen now for, at least another couple of weeks until we get our next opportunity to speak to some of these guys. So make sure you go back, give those a listen. And if you haven't, we recapped the entire week. Brian Howell and I did on our podcast on his channel. So make sure you go check that one out as well. Some good stuff from Brian and I. But it is week 2, and we are off and rolling. Marshall Faulk back in Boulder as he was in Canton over the weekend with the NFL Hall of Fame enshrinement. Good to catch up with Coach Faulk. Very interesting moving forward this year for Colorado. We all know how different things are for these Buffs, especially offensively without Shedeur and Travis. And Coach Faulk really hasn't been quiet about just how different things are going to be now moving forward and how they had to play offense and how they had to operate last year with those two guys. He hasn't really been shy about being real about a lot of that stuff, which I think is interesting because I'm getting that sense in a larger consensus from a lot of players on this team. So it'll be interesting to see if that is actually tangible and translates. So I'll get into that here in just a little bit. Coach Faulk started off by saying it was tough to tell what they had in the backfield overall because of the team's strengths. And essentially, he's saying that it was very tough to tell how talented their running backs were because they had Shedeur, Travis, Jimmy, LeJohntay, and Will. That's basically what he's saying, right? And I don't think that he's entirely wrong on that one. But I think he's leaving out a little bit more in that they could have committed to the ground game more and you would have had an opportunity. But at the same time, I think he is accurate in that if you're really, truly evaluating what the running game is going to look like, specifically based on what they did just last year, you are a little bit off base because it is a new year. It is a new team. And I know a lot of you out there are probably laughing because I've probably been the most vocal critic of how they've handled their running back room all summer. And look, as I always have said, if I get something wrong or if one of my, predictions are wrong, I own it. This is just my analysis. But certainly that is the position room that I am most concerned about, I would say, heading into the season. However, it doesn't mean that I don't think they could have a good year, right? They do have some talent in that room. I'm just not sure if it's enough. And certainly the depth there is minimal. So they can't suffer too many injuries. But I think he's correct in that it's important to make sure you give everybody a clean slate at what they can do because it won't be business as usual as it was the last 2 years. And the other thing that comes up, and it came up with Dallan Hayden a little bit, it's tough because a lot of the running back room doesn't have a lot of carryover, right? And Charlie's gone, and Micah was too young last year to really have a full perspective of it, and probably still is. But Dallan Hayden, I thought, put it well today about, there's some frustration, I think, with how they ran the ball the last 2 years by the guys who were actually in charge of doing that. And it popped up in 23 and it popped up in 24 because the opportunities were few and far between. And I think everyone is very much looking forward to writing a new chapter this year because they will emphasize running the football. To what degree they have success with it becomes a different question, but they are much better suited overall. And the one other thing that I think it's important before I kind of break down some of these other comments, there is a factor that Marshall Faulk brought up while speaking to us today, and that they will be counted on. They were not counted on really the last 2 years because we knew, as did the coaches and as did the program, that if they couldn't move the ball on the ground, that was just, that was like a side order to what their offense really was. But they counted on Shedeur. They counted on those receivers. It would have been nice, and it certainly would have been a big boost, and it probably would have taken them over the top if they could have found a way to consistently run the football, because when they did rush for over 100 yards, it meant Shedeur wasn't getting sacked. They were gaining positive yardage, and they weren't one-dimensional, which I think at times last year, especially when they ran up against the better teams, they struggled with not being able to keep a defense on their heels. And if Caden Salter is the starting quarterback this year and they really lean into that RPO heavy system, then I think the defense at a bare minimum will have to play more honest. So as good as Shedeur was and as much as they produced, the looks I would think that Colorado's offense will get this year probably won't be as tough to decipher because it won't be as easy for a defense to figure out what you're doing on nearly every play. And it wasn't that they weren't prepared for the run last year, but they were almost daring Colorado to run the football at different times with, boxes that weren't loaded, and CU's offensive line couldn't generate the push. We understand the story. And we also understand that for the past 2 years, Coach Prime has talked about running the football being their top priority. It was heading into last season, and they managed to run it enough over a good chunk there in the middle of the season to get them where they ultimately went. Now, they came up just short of that Big 12 championship appearance, but either way, it was still a fantastic season. And Isaiah Augustive was certainly a big part of that. Now he's gone. Brandon Hood, we thought might be a potential candidate to step in and see more carries this year. He's gone. They replace both of those guys with Dekalon Taylor, who is a bit of a gadget guy, a bit of a tweener. He will remind a lot of people of Dylan Edwards, is what I would say. He was a slot receiver pretty much his whole career up until last year at Incarnate Word, and he had a very nice breakout season at the FCS level. It'll be a really interesting year for him, and also an interesting thing to watch for as how they choose to utilize him, because I think there's a lot of different things that you can do with Dekalon, but we'll get into all of that here as we go along. So Faulk was talking about how tough it was to assess what it was they had, and I think in spring ball, part of that was true as well, because he felt like the talent up front wasn't where it is now, certainly with some of these guys they brought in, and he feels like now they can really accurately assess who they have, what they have, who's good at what, and what positions do these players need to be put in to test them and see what is really the order of things as they head into the season. I don't think they're really there yet. This is still install days. What is it? Day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sixth practice of fall. So they're on their sixth install day. They'll have 2 more of those days. So I would say towards the end of this week, and as we get into week 3 and week 4, you'll really start to be able to maybe read a little bit more out of what we're seeing on some of these well-out videos. And I think more of the pieces will organically fall into place because they'll just have had more time to practice and sort all of that out, right? So that was probably the biggest point Faulk continues to make, is that the way they played, no one can really accurately assess what they had, which, look, as I say, when they did commit to running the football last year and were able to find some success with it, they were pretty good. They were undefeated, right? Isaiah Augustive had a couple of really nice games. Outside of that, they struggled to find much traction, and that's what's left. And so it's on Dallan, Hayden, and Micah Welch to have certainly healthier years, and I think both of those guys approached this summer with that intention, as both spoke about at length, how they took strength and conditioning more seriously. They're learning about their bodies more, and they're both really looking forward to and itching to get back onto the field this season. Coach Faulk also brought something up that I thought was interesting, because when you have a staff that is comprised of 3 Hall of Famers and they're on staff in the building every day, especially in a position room, it can be intimidating to bring them football stuff, I would imagine, as another coach. In some cases, Coach Faulk is make sure that he stresses there are no bad ideas, is what he said, and that he wants to make sure nobody's intimidated because of the level that he played at and how much football he's seen, that they feel like discouraged to bring an idea to him. He's a big proponent of open collaboration, and look, you can't catch everything yourself. I like that, because I think there's some times where from the outside looking in, a guy as accomplished as him, you go, well, I mean, is he really open to hearing what someone who didn't play in the NFL had to say, or somebody who only played in college had to say, or someone who's not a Hall of Famer? That's not him, and that probably is important, because they really don't have that type of support. Not that you ever really would in the running back room, but he does have his son, which I thought was interesting. Marshall Faulk Jr. is in there, I believe that's his name. and they also have Johnny Mack in that running back room as well. So it's a completely new group. And he talked about how one of the biggest things that they're doing right now is unlearning a lot of bad habits and finding out through Micah Welch and also through Coach Faulk, he has adjusted where the running backs are lining up in the backfield this year, which is interesting. And he talked about unlearning a lot of habits, and I'm sure there was a lot of that going on in spring ball. And the hope is the guys who are here, Dallan and Micah, those guys can hit the ground running because they know more of what's expected. Falk talked about how he didn't really have a problem with, after getting the handoff, doing things differently, but he said he's a stickler for footwork on where you line up and handing off the football. He said everybody's got the same canvas and paintbrush to start, and then from there things can change, which I like that there's a different perspective being brought to the running back room, because clearly what they had been doing through whatever reasoning you want to use, Shedeur being there, offensive line not very good, maybe running backs couldn't find a way to get it done, but it wasn't working. So changing it, I think, was important. And having that experienced set of eyes on everything, the reason why you bring him in is because he can see things that other guys can't, because he's played it at that level and he's such a football junkie. He talked about how growing up he would be down there in the Superdome for Saints games because he was such a football nerd that all he wanted to do was sell popcorn, but he had to watch the sorriest team of the 80s is what he said. So that's how much he loves the game. And I think everybody's going to get a fair shake with him. If you show up and you do your job and you work hard, I think you will get a fair shake from Coach Marshall Faulk. Now, you may not be able to get things done in certain ways, or someone may be better than you at different things, but I think he would evaluate you honestly. I like that about him. As we know about every position here. It doesn't matter if you're a walk-on, a five-star. If you're the best and you can go, you're going to get out there and get your opportunities eventually, which is important. He talked about what he saw in Simeon Price and Dekalon Taylor, and it was interesting. I'm sure he had some say, but he didn't explicitly make sure that we knew that he was involved in the decisions in personnel. He said, look, I'm a coach. I'm here to coach what they give me. So take it for what you will. But Simeon Price and Dekalon Taylor are the new additions to the running back. And he likes that they're a little bit older because they truly appreciate the opportunity that they have here. Price has played D1. Price has played major college football, but he's just been behind a lot of guys. Dekalon Taylor, he's never been at this level, but he is experienced and he is older and he's very mature from getting to talk to him today. So that's a guy who will be able to understand and appreciate what Colorado has this year, which I also think is very important. I talk about how they will be counted on, and I want to make sure I elaborate a little bit on that, because as I said, they were not counted on the last 2 years, but they are going to be counted on to move the football down the field. Colorado can't sit back and drop back and pass. That's not going to be what they can do all game long. You could get away with it with Shedeur because of how much talent they had outside and how good he really was at setting things up pre-snap. This year, just by nature of taking a bit of a step back in the quarterback position and changing the style overall, you will be relied upon to move the football and score points in the running back room and on the ground. It's one of those things that you don't get around, okay? So whether it's the RPO with Caden Salter, whether it's the improved offensive line, whether it's adding Dekalon Taylor, whether it's a bigger year and a healthier year for Dallan Hayden, they are relied upon. So instantly the dynamic of the offense changes, and you have to put way more focus on the running game because you know that heading into the year, whereas the last couple of years you were trying to develop it, but it wasn't ever their main focus, which I think was clear to anybody with two eyeballs who watch the games. It's just the truth. They were able to find something that worked and some wrinkles in 11 personnel last year when they got Savell Smalls onto the field, and they finally figured out Isaiah Gustive is the one who needs the bulk of the touches. I talked to Coach Faulk and asked him because, look, when he won the MVP and set the NFL record for scrimmage yards with over 2,400 in a season, that's because he did a little bit of everything, but he was getting a lot of snaps. He's getting a lot of touches. It's a lot of receptions, right? I believe when he crossed the plateau, he was the first NFL running back, and he might still be, to have 12,000 career rushing yards and 6,000 career receiving yards. He did it in different ways, and I think that's important to have that perspective in the room because Dekalon Taylor's a gadget guy that you don't have to just use out of the backfield. He was primarily a slot receiver up until last year, and so those are some skills that you can take advantage of. And in the swing game, in the pre-snap motion, getting the linebackers to move, figuring out what the defense is doing, all that stuff is really important, and that is one of those areas of expertise that I think Coach Faulk really brings to the equation. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he and Coach Shermer and Coach Bartoloni, the passing game coordinator, collaborate and develop an offense with schemes that are effective for what they have out there and what it is that they're trying to do. That's pretty much everything really from Coach Faulk himself. He talked about how he had to be in Canton this weekend, but he didn't want to be. It was the first time he's ever been there, but didn't actually want to be there, which I think kind of goes to show he's getting that football bug back, right? We talked to Coach Sapp last year about how much he loves coaching, and the kids have really, awoken his passion. I could see Faulk somewhat down the same trajectory. I don't know if he's going to be as boisterous about it as Coach Sapp is, just because of the guy who he is, but I can see the gears moving. I mean, look. When was the last time Marshall Faulk was a part of a training camp in the trenches like this? Even though he's not playing, this is the closest he can get. I mean, that lights a fire in you, especially for a guy who lives and breathes the game of football as he does, and he says he does. Moving on to Dallan Hayden. Huge year for Dallan Hayden. Huge year for Dallan Hayden. Banged up last year, high ankle sprain. He said that the ankle really affected him last year, and he never felt like he was at 100%, which, again, I've been critical of Dallan in the past. There's no doubt about it. The thought of entering the year based upon what we've seen from him as running back one is a little bit nerve-wracking to me. But at the same time, I'm seeing some things in practice that show me he's bigger, faster, stronger, and I think that's important. He's not maybe the home run guy that we thought he might be coming in from Ohio State. He just needs to be real solid this year, right? We're talking about ball security and getting positive yards. He's broken some big runs in camp. I do believe he looks better. He's very mature. He's an excellent young man. He does great work in the community. I think Dallan Hayden's a great human being. And I think he's understood what happened last year, was frustrated by last year, not just by how he played, which he did, but he was, but he was also frustrated with how they chose to play. And that comes through, and he wasn't, saying that, but that's based upon some of the things he said when he specifically talks about we had two great players and great receivers last year. But this year he talks about how they have an upgraded offensive line and different personnel groupings that they could use, and it's going fantastic. So as far as being balanced, clearly the signs are there that they understand it's something they're going to have to do, and they're trying to put an emphasis on building that up truly. And as a running back, that stuff can only make you happy because, like I said, last year, even I got the vibe from Coach Flea, and, even in year one, that what can a running back do when you're getting 5-6 touches, a game, and maybe it's 3 to 4? I mean, it's hard to build a rhythm like that. Now, you want to be efficient, but if that's all you're doing, it's hard to make the most of what you're being given because you haven't really gotten a chance to, kind of get your feet wet in the game. That's the way they had to play. Now it's a totally different system. It really is. And with Kaidon Salter there, all these running backs talked about how much that's going to help, obviously defensively playing honest, but really keeping that defensive end at bay and not necessarily on his toes, but maybe on his heels a little bit because the quarterback run is now a real threat with Kaidon Salter involved in the system. And I'm looking forward to seeing what it looks like and what does this offense look like and how quickly can they adjust? Because there will be an adjustment period that's needed after they get onto the field and they see what does and what doesn't work. Just like Nebraska last year, they had to change a lot after Nebraska, and it made a big difference. So we understand that's part of the process here. He talked about how he really changed his offseason in the training room and in the weight room and focused more on strength and conditioning and really trying to work out his ankles so he doesn't have an issue like that pop up again. You can tell, though, he is disappointed with how last year went for him. And coming in from Ohio State, we all had very high expectations for Dallan Hayden. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that was the case. And he didn't meet them as far as his performance on the field. I'm really looking forward to him having another opportunity to show us why that wasn't the real Dallan. And again, I am not hoping it doesn't work out in any way, shape, or form. I just want to say that again because I know a lot of you are sensitive out there, and my objective analysis is that I'm concerned about what they have overall in the running back room, but it doesn't mean I'm not rooting for the human beings and the people to do better. And I do think it's in there. Will it happen? It does remain to be seen. Now, I think they have a better opportunity because, as Pat Shermer said the other day, they're better suited overall. Offensive line should be upgraded. They do have the running quarterback. The running system, the RPO will be in place with a legitimate shot of the R. Not that it wasn't last year, but we all understand what Shedeur's like with the running game and the run fakes. It's just, different players have different tendencies. Dallan also talked about how he's really connecting with Coach Faulk. That's one thing that you've really seen from Micah and Dallan. Both those guys sponges and taking the opportunity to soak up all they can, all the knowledge that they possibly can. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Dallan can do. I hope he can put together a good year because I think they need his leadership too. I think he's a guy who can become a leader for this group. He's quiet. He's going to do it by example. But I think he can be. I think he can be. Micah Welch, we spoke to. Micah's also an excellent young man. He's just raw as a human being is how I would describe him. Right? He's one of those guys that he's a sophomore and he's played a lot already, but some like Jordan Seaton comes in at 18 and you're like, well, I can see what you're going to be like at 30. Micah, just a little more seasoning needed there. Different strokes for different folks. He talked about how we are going to see two running backs on the field this year, which is great because that screams formational versatility to me. That screams pre-snap motion to me, motioning guys out of the backfield and giving your quarterbacks an opportunity to get a better read on what you're being thrown on a down-to-down basis. He says, look, we're definitely running the ball this year. And again, I go back to it's not my question of if they're going to do it because they have to do it. It's my question of the success that they're going to be able to generate. And I think right now, my level of encouragement is better than I expected it to be a week through camp because I do believe Mike has made a jump physically. You can see it in his arms. I think Dallan looks a lot more confident in his own skin right now, which I think is important as well. And I think Dekalon brings a level of maturity and that little gadget factor that they didn't really have without him. He's got some wiggle to him, and I would say is probably the real lone home run hitter in that backfield, but I could end up being wrong there if Simeon Price continues on this trajectory that he's on right now. He had a sick hurdle today in camp. He's one of those guys that's played a lot of college football, but not actually played. He's been in college for a little while now, and when I look at a guy like that, again, it's an opportunity where he's been buried at some of these bigger schools. Now he's got a real shot. I mean, you got to make the most of it. And you love to see him out there making plays. Did not get a chance to talk to Simeon today. Looking forward to meeting him down the line at some point, assumedly. I asked Micah what he learned in year one and how he felt year one went for himself, because clearly coming in as a true freshman, you don't often see a lot of snaps in college football. And he played a good amount. He said he gained a lot of confidence and learned a ton from last year. He was green, he still is, and it's all a learning process. Nobody has it down by 19. I mean, that's for sure. I think everybody, can say amen to that. He said he gained a lot of confidence and learning how to deal with his body, having the hamstring issues that held him out for a decent chunk of last year. He said he never really had to work on his hamstrings before college. And it kind of goes back to, I think, and this is a strange side rant from me. Even high school football, we got to find a better way as high school coaches to approach strength and conditioning of boys under 18. Like it's got to be more flexibility based, and we got to figure out a lot of that stuff because I watch these guys lift for high school football and they're all cleaning and that's all they're doing with these old weights, and yeah, okay, I'm sure a lot of that works too, but we have so much more information behind our integrative physiology now of how our body works that I'd like to see that across high school sports. Obviously, just a weird little comment rant from me, but that's something that's bothered me for a very long time. And you hear it in a comment like that, like, I didn't know I had to take care of my hamstrings. You're a running back. How does your high school coach not come in and help you with that, or at least instill that? It's huge. So again, it's just one of those things. And he says, look, I spent a lot of time in the strength and conditioning, weight room, et cetera, really building. He says he fixed it. Knock on wood, that's the case. He also talked about how having Caden Salter there will really open up the offense. He's hoping as well. Dekalon Taylor coming over from Incarnate Word, very mature young man, very articulate. Really enjoyed talking to him and getting to meet him today. He does say he's the fastest on the team. He did win a race the other day against Tyrekus Davis, who also had a sick interception at practice today as well. At the end of practice, that race was. But look, this is one of those guys that if you can continue to find different ways throughout the course of the season to get him the football in space, I struggle to think it's not going to go all that well. Ball security is going to be a big deal, as it will overall, as it always is. But Colorado has a bit of a slighter running back room, smaller running back room. These guys aren't very big. Price is the only one over 6 feet. So I think it could be a problem, especially down on the goal line. We'll see. I mean, Micah's that bowling ball type of guy, but sometimes you need the bruiser, and I think that's where Price comes into play. My hot take for the running back room would be that Price earns more touches because I think he's the most violent runner of this group. I'm not exactly sure because I'm not down there at practice, but some of these clips, he has surpassed my expectations early. He's a guy I really didn't have any expectations for, and I'm really starting to appreciate what I'm seeing from him because I think that's a piece they're going to end up needing. Now we'll see. I mean, is it a good sign that he was not one of the new transfers to speak to us today as far as their opinion of him? Not particularly. However, my eyes tell me a different story based upon what I'm seeing on the field. And they didn't get it right with Isaiah Gustive last year right away either. It took them a little while to really trust him because in practice he wasn't getting it done according to them, but it didn't really matter. When it came to Saturdays, he was the only one finding a way to make it work on the field. And again, this isn't going to be a perfect system where you're going to have, crystal clear holes opened up by your offensive line. You're going to have to be shifty and make guys miss, which is where I think Dekalon Taylor comes into play because he's got some wiggle to him that I don't think the other guys have. It's just a little different. It looks a little different. And the other part of it on the flip side is you remember what year one looked like trying to run Dylan Edwards in between the tackles constantly. There's a little part of me that's concerned about that. The hope here is that the running quarterback and the improved offensive line can alleviate maybe some of what I'm thinking it could be. So I'm hoping it goes the opposite direction. I am, because certainly, I mean, the quality of the offensive line between year one and year three probably shouldn't be comparable, and let's hope it's not. That's the truth. He really enjoyed watching Colorado the last couple of years. I asked him about, Boulder and his expectations and what his perceptions were of CU before committing, and he said it was the coaches. He has great respect for Coach Prime and this coaching staff and a group of guys who have been there and done it before, and he really appreciates the opportunity to be here, which harkens back to what Coach Faulk said to us today, that one of the traits he loves in Simeon and in Dekalon is that they both know what this is, and being at CU and having the opportunity to compete for snaps and be on this roster, what it means, and they are taking full advantage of it. It looks like right now from what we're seeing. He's learning the offense, and he's learning that the offense, he needs to see things from a more well-rounded perspective, is what he said he's taking away from Coach Faulk. It sounds like Marshall's really trying to expand the field of vision for his guys in his room and teach them that they've got to be football players before running backs. And I think actually he might have even said that today, that you look, when you get out there, you got to be able to do a little bit of everything. If you don't know what's going on, you're going to hurt us. And because you could potentially be helping us by understanding more in detail and in depth about what the concepts are and about how to be more of a factor, especially in pass protection. That is also one of my concerns here. Pass protection. Caden's not going to bounce up as easy as Shedeur, and neither will Juju. Their pass protection has lacked the last couple of years. I think we all understand that. Even Augustive definitely probably struggled in that area, even when he was running well. But that was part of the challenge they had to deal with based upon their roster construction of the last 2 years. Does it concern me that they're pretty small in that room? Yeah. Does it concern me they don't really have a big dude? Yeah. I wonder if there will be times where they look to maybe put a tight end back there, maybe an Atkins back there. I mean, you don't want to tip things off too much, but I wonder how versatile they get because that pass protection element is going to be vital this year with Caden Salter. I mean, he's going to be less of a guy that operates inside the pocket. It's going to be more about what he can do outside the tackle box and getting on the run and making throws accurately and with the right zip on them on the run. And it's just kind of been his MO. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Coach Faulk can develop them as pass protectors because he was a pretty damn good one in his time. That was the bulk of what we learned today from the running back room. Certainly going to be a work in progress for that group, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Marshall Faulk can do because that pedigree, it doesn't feel like it's going to hurt. Tomorrow, we are scheduled to speak to the defensive line coaches, George Hilo, Coach Sapp, and Coach Pecco. Looking forward to getting to talk to some of those gentlemen. Before I get out of here, I got to say, you guys dropped the ball on the Rex on my show recommendations last week. I mean, I figured it out, but just disappointed. Not upset, just disappointed. It's like, come on, help me out here just a little bit. Anyway, I appreciate you for watching. See you soon.